Hi, I'm Melanie, and this is Artifact and Landmark. This episode is about Adams & Co., which was a Victorian glassworks founded in 1851 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They operated until about 1891 when they were absorbed into the U.S. Glass Company. The works had many lives and partners. Many of these partners would form their own glassworks, and we see some offshoots, including King & Co., Doyle Co., and Dalzell Brothers Gilmore. The company would evolve from making essentially glass fruit jars, glass lamps, chimneys, to a wide range of beautiful pressed glass tableware. Most of the pressed glass pieces collected today were manufactured essentially during the last years of the company. As an American pressed glass or EAPG collector, Adams & Co. does provide a wide variety of patterns and colors. And I'm just going to go through a few examples here. The first one is pattern number 75, also known as square panes. This one is found at the Museum of American Glass. And you can see here the wonderful form of this piece. And they have many examples where they hollow out the stem, or they form these beautiful geometric kind of patterns. The next one we have is number 130, Sensation. This is also known as Thousand Eyes for obvious reasons. And we have examples here at the Met Museum of New York. And you can see the optical illusion this can create. Like many of the Victorian glassworks of the day, they also offered up some of these in beautiful colors. And of course, some of them do fluoresce. One item to watch out for is some of these patterns have also been reproduced. So John Adams was known for introducing lime into glass production. So his line of glassware will not include lead versus other lines of the day. The earliest reference we could find to a glassworks associated with John Adams dates back to 1852, and it's an advertisement. The namesake of this company, John Adams, was born in 1823 in what was then called Westmoreland County. Of course, Westmoreland County got divvied up many times after this. This company operated at first as the Bohemian Glassworks under a partnership between Adams, Roseman, and Company. The location of the works was at the intersection of Water and Ross Streets, which was in Pittsburgh, and we can see it here on a map from 1852. The partnership included John Adams and Joseph Roseman. John Adams would have been about 28 years old, and Joseph Roseman would have been about 30 years old. It's unclear when Joseph left the partnership. We do know that he continued to live on the south side or Birmingham, Pittsburgh. He continued to be active in the glass trade until about 10 years before his passing, which was in 1899. The next style of the company was Adams, Macklin & Co., with the first mention of this company in 1854. We find them also operating out of the same location at Ross and Water. And then John Adams now would be 31. His partner Thomas Macklin would have been about 37 years old and was a grocer by trade. That year, we also see Adams advertising a new fruit jar, which actually might explain one reason for this new partnership. Tragically, that same year in September, Thomas Macklin succumbs to cholera. He would have only been about 37 years old. He would leave behind his wife Martha Stewart, a daughter Margaret Jane, and a son Thomas, who was a baby when his father passed. Unfortunately, his son Tommy would pass away only 5 years later. As a sidebar, Thomas Macklin would be one of many to die during this cholera outbreak of 1854. It's reported that in 1 week, September 16th to September 23rd, almost 350 people died of this infection. And for some perspective, estimates of the amount of deaths one could expect around this time would have been 1,200 per year. And that compares, of course, to the 350 in this 1 week in September 1854. Of course, other cities, both in the United States and around the world, had outbreaks as well with similar death tolls. Even with Macklin's death, the company continued to operate under the same name of Adams, Macklin & Co. In the book Pittsburgh as It Is, published by George Henry Thurston in 1857, we get a glimpse into the Pittsburgh glassworks around this time. If we ignore the typo of Adams' founding date of 1831, which should read 1851, we can see that Adams has 20 pots, which are the clay pots used in the furnace to melt the glass. And the number of pots is a good indication of how much glass they can produce. What it doesn't indicate is a firm's financial health. We see that in that same year, in 1857, Adams Macklin Co. actually goes bankrupt. The glassworks is purchased at a sheriff's sale by two of his creditors, Alexander King. At that time, he was a wholesale grocer and an importer of soda ash, and soda ash being very important, a key ingredient for glass production. And the other creditor was Michael McCullough, who was also a wholesale grocer and liquor dealer. So you would see why these two individuals would be interested in purchasing the glassworks. So the business does continue to operate at that same address until about 1860, but we do know that in 1862, Alexander King will separate from the company, so we assume he's also a partner. So in 1860, the current site of the glassworks were torn down for a company to expand onto that land, and that company was Jones Boyd Co., also known as the Pittsburgh Steelworks. At the same time, Adams is actually in the process of building a new glass factory across the Monongahela in Birmingham, now known as the South Side. This new factory would be built at McKee, now known as 10th, and Williams, now known as P.J. McArdle Roadway. The glassworks will spend the remainder of its operations at this location, expanding to several additional lots in the neighborhood. This illustration shows what the works would look like in 1879. We have the factory on the left-hand side, and we have the offices on the right-hand side. We also have a map showing the location from 1872, and you can see the location here of the works and the offices. With the move in 1861, the business adopts its final name of Adams and Company. Advertisements during this period indicate they manufacture flint glass as well as green and flint fruit jars. They also list a new business address of number 12 Wood in Pittsburgh at the corner of Wood and Front Streets. And so this was most likely a warehouse that they used in Pittsburgh, but I'm not sure when they vacated this property. As mentioned before, in 1862, we see Alexander King break away from the company, forming his own glassworks in the style of King & Co. We also see in 1865 that their bankruptcy from 1857 is coming back into the courts. The reason is because other creditors are suing Alexander King and Michael McCullough for profiting from the bankruptcy, since they believe they purchased the glassworks for much too low of a price. They do end up having to pay $16,200 to those creditors, which equates to over $600,000 in today's money. In 1867, William and Joseph Doyle now leave the partnership to form their own company, Doyle Co. Their glassworks would also operate out of Birmingham or the South Side. But with a few people leaving, we see someone coming into the partnership, and this is George F. Easton, and he joins in 1868. In 1874, we see more partnership changes. This time we see Peter Kunzler leave the partnership. So this leaves John Adams, John Malone, George F. Easton, and Godfried Miller as partners. But the next year, in 1875, John Adams brings a few of his sons into the business, Adolphus Adams and William Adams, and they also add James Dalzell to the firm. In 1876, Adams & Co., along with many other glassworks, exhibit at the Centennial International Exhibition, held in Philadelphia in 1876. In that same year of 1876, we see that the firm has 21 pots, which is slightly increased from its operation in Pittsburgh, which again had those 20 pots. In 1877, we see another change in the partnership. This time, John Malone leaves. In 1879, the leadership includes John Adams, his sons, Adolphus and William, James Dalzell, and George F. Easton, and finally, Godfried Miller. By that year, in 1879, Adams & Co. has expanded to over 2 acres on William Street. At that time, the works had 2 factories alongside 5 additional buildings and 2 furnaces with a combined total of 23 pots. Their range of products included tableware, lamps, and jelly tumblers. The firm generated annual sales of nearing $200,000, and they served clients in the United States, Canada, Cuba, and South America. The workforce comprises about 200 skilled workers with an average weekly payroll amounting to about $10 per worker per week. In 1880, David E. Carl joins the firm, and in later years, Carl would also become superintendent of McKee Glass in Jeannette, Pennsylvania. We also see on or before 1882, Samuel G. Vogley start producing many popular designs for the firm. In addition to some of these glass designs, we also see a few patents that are interesting. You can still find lamps that were designed from this specific 1883 patent, and you can see here it's a beautiful column lamp. And in the center is this dome, and in this dome you would actually put flowers or other objects. One of these lamps sold through Jeffrey S. Evans and Associate, an auction house, for $780 in 2024. Now in 1883, we see another partner leave the firm. This time it's James Dalzell, and he'll be leaving to start a business called Dalzell Brothers Gilmore in Wellsburg, West Virginia. Unfortunately, he would pass in 1893 at the age of 39. On May 6, 1884, we see a fire destroy one of the Adams & Co. buildings, and it's said to have destroyed it within an hour, so the firemen couldn't actually get to it on time. It's said to have been started in the layers, which is what manages the nailing process or the cooling down process of the glass. This loss was estimated at $10,000. And then in this 1884 Sanborn map, we can see the property, and this is actually a property being leased to Challoner and Hogan & Co., which was another glass manufacturer. And we can see here it's clearly shown as burnt down. Unfortunately, the same location at that time was still occupied by Adams & Co., would also experience another devastating fire in 1887. This time, the loss is estimated at $40,000. This 1884 map also highlights the expansion challenges that Adams and other glassworks are experiencing during this time. We can see the many properties owned or leased by Adams Co., and they're spread across the neighborhood. So an important event happens in 1886 that would really change the industry. What we see is the first glass syndicate, and it's announced that the Adams & Co. will be part of this syndicate, and it's called the American Flint and Lime Glass Association. The aim of this group is to control pricing. That same year, in November 1886, we see the passing of John Adams, of course, the founder and the namesake of this company. There are several touching articles written about the funeral and this man and his passing, which I'll cover in the next video. In 1890, some rumors surfaced that this American Flint and Lime Glass Association is looking to sell out to an English company. But in 1891, we see Adams Co. and other glassworks, including their neighbor Doyle Co., form a new company, the U.S. Glass Company. We'll be delving more into the U.S. Glass Company and another large combine, the National Glass Company, in another video as well. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Adams Glass. Subscribe to find out more about John Adams and other American glassworks.